Hey, how's it going? This is week 5 of me watching and discussing every fall 2023 anime. In this video I will be talking about every episode released between October 23rd and October 29th. These weeks are starting to calm down a bit. I had 17 episodes to watch this time around, not counting everything that has been dropped so far. So let's get to it. Undead Unluck, Episode 4. This episode felt a bit more uneven than the rest so far. They really cranked up the girly aura on this new lady to the max, and I felt that it got to be a bit overbearing eventually. Seeing her squee and go kya like an overly excited schoolgirl could be plenty cute, but it was pushed a bit too hard for its own good here. I do think it's a pretty funny circumstance that these three people are basically in a love triangle. For a scenario like this to add a layer on top of all of the crazy fighting sure does create a unique atmosphere that is totally bonkers but in all of the right ways. I didn't expect this new girl to be killed off. Her design seemed too good to not be a main character. While I did feel that some of her mannerisms were a bit too over the top in this episode, I still thought she was a great character and I would have loved to see more of her. I'm a bit bummed about that. But our main duo is certainly strong enough to carry the entire show all on their own either way. I will miss the new girl, but I'm sure I'll have a great time with the rest of the show regardless.
Sousou no Frieren.
Episode 8. There's a good amount of satisfying violence in this episode. Seeing Frieren just completely ruthlessly murder this demon was pretty hype. Shit really hits the fan with the demons and they start killing a bunch of people. This dude in particular seems to have the same blood ability as Choso from Jujutsu Kaisen. That's pretty wild. I feel that Frieren's decision to leave the coming battles to Fern and Stark is an interesting one because it seems plenty possible that they'll just get killed. But I guess Frieren would indeed know what she's doing. I'd assume she's got a better grasp of their abilities than me. Indeed, having them fight on their own without Frieren's help would do more to develop their abilities, but this is obviously under the assumption that they won't die. But of course, they survived just fine. Seeing Fern blast this dude through the window was super cool. Most viewers would likely wonder where Fern would be while Stark was chatting with the demons, so a subtle build-up would have been occurring for most of us that would eventually materialize into this blast through the window. Effective and satisfying, though I was a bit confused over why they just ran away after this. I thought their goal was to kill the demons, but now when they had them on the back foot, they just took the hostage and retreated. The music swelling up towards the end of the episode as our main demon guy recalls who Frieren is was also tastefully dramatic. A lovely finishing touch upon this episode as a whole. Kamonohashi no Kindan Suiri, Episode 4. In this episode we get another cool case solved and we get some more insight into this new purple hair dude. I had figured he would be some super serious, highly skilled individual, but it seems he's actually just a total goofball. And I don't mind this one bit. In fact, I think this is pretty great. Anyway, Purple Hair Man is trying to catch Ron in the act of sleuthing, but Ron is obviously privy to the fact that this is happening and avoids making this clear to him, even giving him some hearing damage at one point in this episode. The case itself was also pretty awesome. There's many moving parts that play into the final deduction, and it's satisfying to see all the dots be connected. It feels creative and clever to my simple mind. Also, Amamiya continues to be best girl by giving Totomaru the most reluctant bit of thanks that I've seen in quite a while. All around a fun episode, I'm interested to see how this new purple-haired character is going to be implemented. Oh, and by the way, this dude's name is
Spitfire.
Houkago Shounen Hanako-kun, Episode 3. So, Hanako-kun has a cold and mistakes a fire hydrant for Yashiro's legs. Goofy. And then the mokke appear again to give him death by warm fuzzies. Damn, what a way to go. In the second half, some small cute girl apparently finds a mokke and makes it her slave. Big combo of cute right here. I'm not sure if I'm really understanding what goals this show has. All of these episodes have been thoroughly mediocre in my eyes so far. I feel like surely someone, somewhere, must have believed in these scripts enough for someone to greenlight an animation to be produced. Did they see something that I don't? Or did they really want to animate just anything at all? Who knows, at least the visuals are cute. Watashi no Oshi wa Akuyaku Reijou, Episode 4. I'm not sure if I've mentioned this before, but this OP is actually legit pretty damn groovy. Seems like our main girl has some overpowered magic potential, which is pretty typical for just about any fantasy anime. I'd appreciate if this show would break away from this mold, but so far there hasn't really been much application for this character trait, so I guess it's no big deal. We get a bunch of information about how the magic system in this world works though, which leads into a battle with some slime, and this is all pretty dull and boring. The visuals are also quite ugly here. This show looks fine enough in more mundane situations, but in scenes like this with a lot of dramatic movement, the animation can't really keep up. I think this show is plenty worthwhile even when the characters are just goofing around, and I'd say this is what the show does best. Some variation can certainly be worthwhile, but not when the new concepts are presented in such a poor manner. We did still get a few cute moments between our main characters, but all in all, I thought this was the weakest episode so far. But I'm too committed to turn back now. I'll likely end up finishing this show either way. Dr. Stone, New World Part 2, Episode 3. This episode was relatively uneventful, but some interesting developments were established as a setup for what's to come, I suppose. Amaryllis runs off to the science crew to tell them about Kohaku, but she's followed by this strong dude Moss, and so Gen needs to talk his way out of them all being killed. A lot of attention is placed on the methods that Gen used to manipulate this negotiation in his favor, and some of them seem pretty absurd. I realize it might be difficult for me to comment on the efficacy of this as an observer, but would people really be meaningfully influenced by stuff like making slightly inaccurate statements to bait a correction? I would say this all played out in our favor simply because Moss's goals happened to align with the science crew's goals. Moss wanted Ibara gone, and the science crew could act as a valuable ally in making this happen, as it was established that Moss had obstacles that prevented him from acting upon this alone. But who knows? Maybe Gen's genius is eluding me somehow. We get a brief cut of Ginro and Kohaku early into this episode, and it looks like Ginro is only partially petrified. Is this going to be a problem? Is he dead? Uh-oh. Under Ninja, Episode 4. Oh boy, we get a throwback to the Xbox gameplay from the first episode here. Nice. This Russian dude just never gets a break, man. From what I've understood, he's just doing what he's doing because people are blackmailing him with the safety of his kid. But now, the ninjas are taking him in and recruiting him, and even taking his kid away from his previous organization only so that they can take this leverage for themselves instead. This dude with the teddy bear also makes a move on one of these enemy ladies, and she seems to be into it. Good for him, I guess. I just want to see our Russian dude get a good ending for himself and his family. Also, this gross old dude is apparently a pretty hot lady. I did not see that one coming. Keiken sumi no kimi to keiken zero no ore ga otsukiai suru hanashi. Or Kimizero, Episode 4. Things continue to kind of derail in this episode as this new girl is just a total shit stain on this whole show. Her suddenly being romantically obsessed with our main guy feels incredibly forced and just downright dumb. Thankfully though, her presence is still fairly minor. She's only relevant for a few minutes in this episode, and then we go back to seeing our main couple be adorable. These scenes have a tone that I really appreciate. They almost carry a sort of healing energy, and they're just a very pure flavor of fun. Seeing main guy show some gaming streams to Runa was a bit cringe though. What are you doing, dude? But I guess I'm not really one to talk. I dragged my significant other into watching anime with me, and that's probably not much better. The episode ends on this new girl plotting to steal Ryuto away from Runa, and this sure does not bode well. This scene was really awkward and even teetering on the edge of being embarrassing, but I guess I'll see what happens. I'm too deep to back down from this show now. 16-bit sensation, another layer, episode 4. We get a pretty lengthy look at an intro for the game Shizuku in this episode, and this whole segment is truly awe-inspiring to me. There is something about these old pixel-styled graphics and these simple MIDI sounds that just feel incredibly comforting and at home for me. I think it's really cool that they allowed such a lengthy portion of this to be shown, as it really ended up setting a special tone. Shizuku is indeed a real game, and one that is actually considered to be the first visual novel. It was released in 1996 for the PC-98, but it was also later ported to Windows machines, which is what is being discussed in this episode of 16-bit Sensation here. I think it's incredibly cool to see such authentic representations of these advancements. They're talking about real products and discussing the real effects of what this technological leap means. Absolutely huge. Anyway, Konoha is still on the hunt to bring Mamoru back to the game dev crew. He left as he didn't want to develop games for Windows and instead only for the PC-98. Konoha sets up a camp outside of his apartment and continues to be the most adorable damn thing in the world. But her cute mannerisms and dialogues aren't absurd or excessive. They somehow comfortably strides along with just the right amount of subtlety, which makes her stand out as a relatable and human character, while somehow also being the most endearing moe girl in years. Look at her, man. It's almost like seeing Haruhi again. Our game dev crew also go to Summer Comiket in this episode, and we get the obligatory Ikarigendo reference, and it goes real hard. I am so incredibly fond of this concept. Many shows reference this Gendo pose and I almost always love it, but this one goes especially far into being just totally brilliant. I couldn't contain my laughter as this played out.
結局、守は来なかったな。新しいプログラマー探すしかないな。すべてはシナリオ通りだ。
Anyway, after this, Konoha and Mamoru come to some manner of agreement and he decides to go back to developing games even if it is for Windows, but under the condition that they also release a PC-98 version. This certainly seems like a sensible compromise, but this discussion of theirs gave rise to some thoughts for me. I'm too young to have ever used computers that predated Windows, so I can't exactly say that I've stood in Mamoru's shoes, but I can still relate to the way he thinks. Seeing things wither away with time is often a cruel prospect, and in many of these cases, these changes may to many people be a change for the worse. Mamoru acknowledges that Konoha is telling the truth about being a time traveler, and as he realizes this, he also understands that her lack of knowledge for the PC-98 is an indication that the PC-98 will no longer be around in the future, and thus Mamoru faces this harsh reality, that the time of the PC-98 is starting to pass. But Konoha doesn't just settle for him coming to terms with this scenario, even if this is what will lead to her goals being realized. Instead, Konoha spurs him on, saying that if he wants the PC-98 to still be around in the future, he should do something about it. The future can be changed, and it is fine to do so. An incredibly moving sentiment as far as I'm concerned, and one that sends a strong message and moral. All of this also got me thinking about where things will be going in our timeline. More and more people are gravitating to mobile devices these days. I often find it harrowing to see statistics for the devices that people use, as desktop PCs usually only make up a small subset of users in the grand scale of things now, and this scares me. I don't want a future where desktop PCs are phased out as some obscure relic of the past. I don't want a future where my phone is what gets the most focus for future development and software support, but this is almost certainly where things will be going in a few decades. Common people won't own desktop PCs or even laptops eventually. They'll just use their phones and tablets for everything that a PC used to do, and when looking at it from this perspective, I can strongly relate to Mamoru's position, because this future sounds absolutely awful. This short conversation between Konoha and Mamoru only lasts for about 3 minutes, but yet it packs more thought-provoking substance than what many shows can manage in their entire runtime. Art is all about pushing your buttons, and this is something that I'm certainly aware of. I love this show because it happens to very specifically appeal to what I want. So I acknowledge that this is a very personal appreciation, but so is all appreciation of media. Anyway, moving on from this, the crew finish their game and then Mamoru reveals that he's fixed Konoha's busted tablet. And this means that she can finally show off some of her art that she's been wanting to show off ever since the first episode. Mamoru absolutely loses his shit at this, and this exchange ended up being incredibly cathartic for me. The show has been building up to this for several episodes. At first I thought this was just going to be a running gag that would never be more than a joke, but now they actually develop upon this and it creates a great bit of impact. Konoha is also drunk, as she can't hold her liquor at all, but Mamoru is totally sober, so this conversation has a really floaty and cozy energy to it. But especially just seeing Mamoru's facial expression as he sees her art totally seals the deal. Very adorable. After this, Konoha once again goes back to her own time it seems, so I guess we'll be visiting a different time period in the next episode. I'm almost a bit sad to be going away from these older eras, as I find them to be absolutely enchanting. But I'm certain that this show can make any year be portrayed in a light that I find emotionally moving, given its track record so far. This show has made me want to try to get my hands on some old PC-98 computer and get to experience using one for myself. I'd absolutely adore getting to play some of the older Toho games or some classic visual novels on a real PC-98 machine. Maybe one day. This show continues to be absolutely magical for me, and I can't wait to see where it goes from here. Hikikomari Kyuuketsuki no Monmon, Episode 4. This episode opens in a not very reassuring way by having the villain girl do a pretty tasteless maniacal laugh that definitely crosses the line away from being menacing and instead into the obnoxious territory. This entire fight was incredibly generic and downright stupid at many points. There's a ton of tasteless expressions and embarrassing lines of dialogue. Villain girl is just an edgy dweeb, and this edgy nature is later adopted by Tarakomari after she drinks some blood. Apparently, drinking blood makes her super strong, and also makes her enter a state where she can't control her actions or remember what it is she's even doing or whatever. It's just this typical sort of violent frenzy thing. The fight does wrap up before the episode ends, and it seems like the show might be going back to the more light-hearted atmosphere it had at the start. I sure hope this is the case, because it did that a lot better than it did the dramatic action or whatever it is they were going for in this episode. Going by the preview, it seems like a new character might be introduced in the next episode. Here's hoping she's cool.
Spy Family, Season 2, Episode 4. It feels like it's been quite a while since we last made any progress on the main quest in this show. I have to keep reminding myself that the end goal is to get in contact with Damien's dad or whatever. This entire episode felt inconsequential, which isn't exactly unusual for this series, but I felt that this episode was more egregious in this regard than usual. In the first half, the kids play old maid to determine who will get to eat some pastries. In the second half, Lloyd's informant wants to find a cat as a favor to a girl he wants to get closer to. Neither story develops upon anything at all, really. Anya doesn't get smarter, albeit with the potential exception of
Ancient language.
Ancient är ett svårt ord.
Ancient.
Lägg av. Anya doesn't get smarter, albeit with the potential exception of ancient language skills for some reason. And Frankie doesn't get the girl, as she is already taken, obviously. But the destination doesn't matter if the journey itself is worthwhile. But I don't really know if it was in this case. The dialogues are vapid and shallow, and both parts of the episode mostly rely on their comedic elements, which also more or less missed the mark for me. All in all, a fairly weak episode in my opinion.
Bokura no Ameiro Protocol, Episode 4. So our team is having their first match in this episode, and this is so cool to me in a lot of ways, but it's also a total disaster in others. I have like 4,000 hours in CSGO, and this game is basically CSGO. I guess it could be just as likely that it was inspired by Valorant or Overwatch or something, but enough things are similar for me to be able to feel that these people have no idea how to play a tactical FPS. You don't really get a great sense for how they are actually playing, as you only get to see a few seconds of every round, but for the most part, this is basically like watching a match between two teams of silvers in CSGO. They don't hold angles or consider what routes they need to watch, they just sort of rush each other. Even the defenders that need to hold the bomb sites often just rush out to meet the attackers in the middle of the map. And you're telling me this is a pro-level match? Also, the game visuals truly do look awful. I still want to cut them some slack for having had this ambition, but man, it doesn't look great. Our pro tag team starts out by losing 5 rounds in a row on the first half, but then they win 7 in a row on the second half, that then wins them the game. These kinds of matches certainly do happen in CSGO, but how this comeback came about felt completely random. It did not seem like the result of a tactical re-evaluation or anything. The main guy just says, let's rush B before the second half starts, and then they just started winning every round. Is this just the most T-sided map in the world? Is this Office? I've got no clue, man. This is a wild ride. Shangri-La Frontier EP 5. So main dude beats the boss with some help from his rabbit companion. This does seem pretty weird in the context of this being an MMO. For a player to be able to pick up a high-level NPC to join their party due to some random event triggers would be awfully unfair and treated like very poor design in the real world. During the battle, a narrator often interjects to explain a bunch of mechanics and stuff for why and how things work the way they do. This obviously seems like a necessity to allow the viewer to follow along in any capacity at all, but I still feel that this isn't an ideal way of doing this. In the best case, the viewer would already understand the mechanics of this game and thus be able to naturally follow along a battle like this, but obviously this isn't the case, so a narrator needs to cut in and explain what is happening. This comes across as a bit cheap to me, but there wouldn't be many other ways of doing it. This is a problem with this genre overall. Our main duo is apparently hunted by a bunch of people due to a screenshot taken of him and the bunny, and as the show goes through all of the people looking for him, we see a bunch of characters in these super serious poses as if they're the boss of some big bad gang or something. This is just a game, right? These are just common folk sitting at home playing a video game, yeah? This portrayal feels incredibly awkward with this in mind. After this, Hikasayoku's character shows up and attacks people, which gets me to wonder what is going on with the PK mechanics in this game. Can you just attack players anywhere and at any time? There aren't any PK specific zones or servers. If so, how in the hell are people not getting attacked everywhere and all the time? That's pretty damn weird. Anyway, then the episode ends. I'm really not all that sold on this MMO world. It happens a bit too often where it feels like the staff doesn't actually know how an MMO works. But I don't hate it. MF Ghost EP 5. Presenting this race was likely a significant challenge. There are 15 racers that all need to share the available screen time of 20 minutes per episode. The more obvious way to go is to distribute more time to the bigger characters and less time to the smaller ones, and all in all I felt that this episode managed to find a very natural approach to this. The order of the scenes and also the length of them felt cohesive, and I remained engaged in what was going on for just about the entire episode. We also get some pretty overt fanservice from these angel ladies, and I don't know if we really needed this. Don't get me wrong, I love hot anime girls, but this felt a bit tasteless and out of place for this show. Anyway, we get to see some more of this dude being creepy about Ren, which sends her into a shiver. That was pretty funny. This scene between Kanata and the racer in the last place was especially cool and a highlight of this episode for me. I don't usually like overpowered characters in anime, but Kanata's background is so well established that it makes me as a viewer want to see him succeed and get to demonstrate his skills. So seeing him manage to take advantage of his talents even when held back by his vehicle is really satisfying and fun. We also get to see some more of the cute lady racer from the last episode and it's pretty great. Overall, another strong episode and I'm excited for more. Kusuriya no Hitorigoto EP 2, 3 and 4. This show dropped 3 episodes all at once when it started airing. Last week I only watched the first one, but this time I'll catch up on all that are currently available. In episode 2, our main girl moves to the Jade Pavilion and is given the job of testing this concubine lady's food for poisons. This purple-haired dude is also doing stuff, seemingly trying to influence main girl's decisions by charming her, but she isn't the least bit interested. I think this dynamic works in a pretty good way. I'm not typically fond of these arrogant type of male characters that treat their own appearance as some sort of asset and whom girls squee over as soon as they see him. But the fact that main girl gives no craps at all and is instead disgusted and put off by him is incredibly gratifying and fun. She has a really charming aura and a ton of great expressions. Seeing her nerd out about medicine-related things is also really cute, and the gap between her apathetic and cold expressions when compared to her passionate and excited ones is quite appealing. She has a decent breadth of expressions and this is a big plus for me. She is later tasked with making an aphrodisiac and is given access to a bunch of resources and facilities to make her be able to do this, and this gets her so hyped that she does an adorable little dance. This was pretty great. Then some weird ghost thing shows up and then the episode ends. Ominous. In episode 3, this ghost lady from the last episode turns out to just be someone sleepwalking, and main girl is asked to make a medicine to cure this. Main girl yet again earn a bunch more favor points from me on account of her being level-headed and rational among many others who are not. Instead of buying into the idea of it being a ghost, she dismisses this and tries to discern what is actually going on. Seeing her reach accurate conclusions through logical deduction is also something she does in a likable way, but a lot of this rides on the back of everyone else just being downright stupid. The way she thinks isn't all that noteworthy, she just happens to be rational rather than emotional. But the fact that this makes her stand out as some sort of genius who can solve and do things that nobody else at this massive palace can strikes me as a bit strange. Does this huge place really not have a single educated apothecary already? Or even a single guard capable of basic deduction or thought? I wouldn't really describe main girl as a genius among commoners. I would rather describe her as a commoner among idiots. To be fair, I am looking at this from the perspective of someone in the 21st century. Maybe people didn't really have the same kinds of thought processes back in this era, but I still find it strange that this little girl would be the exception to this in that case. One would think that older people with more life experience would be more likely to have this same cognitive potential. But oh well, I guess. I am still enjoying this show more than I would have thought compared to my first impressions of the first episode. Episode 4 was the first that I watched on my TV, and the opening and ending for this show look absolutely insane on an OLED panel. They both make heavy use of spots that are completely black, in contrast with vivid colors, and this looks spectacular on a display that can properly reproduce these contrast differences. Awesome stuff. Mao Mao is tasked to help nurse a concubine back to health after having been subjected to that poison powder that killed her child in episode 1. And yet again, the conflict here mostly only exists due to the utter incompetence of everyone else except for Mao Mao. The caretakers for this sick lady aren't even allowing Mao Mao to enter at first, even though she's been sent on direct orders from the emperor himself. When Mao Mao brings her easily digestible food that is more suited for her sickly composure, she's thrown out by these morons who instead bring her nutrient-heavy food that the lady cannot eat. This does eventually lead up to a moment of relief when Mao Mao straight up smacks one of these caretakers in the face, after learning that she's still been applying the poison powder as makeup on this sick lady even though it was banned. At this point I started assuming she was doing it intentionally as a means to get this concubine out of the picture, but no. It does seem like she just had no idea that she was doing anything wrong. My suspension of disbelief is seriously being strained by how stupid everyone is. Mao Mao does indeed come across as a fantastic character in contrast to everyone else, but the way the show does this feels like cheating. It's sort of like you would say you're the best guitar player in your household, even though you are in fact the only one who plays guitar at all, making this achievement completely worthless. In the same vein, the fact that Mao Mao has a brain is only impressive relative to the fact that nobody else in this palace seems to have one. But if she would be put in a room with other brain havers, then she wouldn't stand out as much. To be fair, she is still plenty charming, and I have no doubt that her character would be strong enough to stand on her own even among other strong characters. But it does rub me the wrong way how the show makes everyone else be unrealistically dumb so that Mao Mao can stand out more. All of this aside though, I do mostly like the tone of this show, and I think Mao Mao is enjoyable to watch. The visuals are also very lovely, so I think I'll continue watching this one to the end. And I think that's it for now. It's been a great week for me as I mostly look forward to just about every show that I'm still watching now. Even Ameiro Protocol is more fun than it is unpleasant for me, even though that show is obviously a bit of a mess. But it is a good kind of mess, at least for me. The strong players mostly remain the same. 16-bit Sensation, Dr. Stone, Sousou no Frieren, Undead Unluck and MF Ghost are all a great time. Kusuriya no Hitorigoto hasn't made me fall in love with it quite yet, but it still has many strengths that I do appreciate. Kimizero and Hikikomari are both still moving along a downwards trajectory, so I'm slightly concerned about what direction these shows will go in. But I am sold on Hikikomari and Runa as characters either way. Thanks for watching my stuff, I hope you have a cool day, and see you next week perhaps.